Welcome to the webinar, Enhanced Video and Limited Liability. This webinar is provided at no cost to members by the Central Station Alarm Association through the generous sponsorship of iView Now. I am pleased to welcome members of the alarm industry who are not yet CSAA members. CSAA also proudly supports monitoring industry education and welcomes and recognizes attendees from the public safety sector. I'm Stephanie Morgan. I'm Director of Education and Training for CSAA. And I'm proud to produce today's presenters, Eric Pritchard and Larry Folsom. Eric Pritchard has spent the past 20 years representing electronic security providers across the United States. Today he focuses on emerging technology in the industry, everything from apps to video to web-based contracts. A veteran of hundreds of industry acquisitions, Eric represents both buyers and sellers as a legal counsel and broker. He currently chairs the Legal Affairs Committee of the Central Station Alarm Association. Larry Folsom is founder and president of iView Now, an enhanced video services company that specializes in video verification. Larry is also president of the Nevada Security Association. Now, before I turn things over to these guys, I thought we would take a quick poll just to find out where attendees are with limited liability and enhanced video. This poll asks, which of the following areas most concern you about enhanced video and liability? And the questions are installation, data storage, PSAP relationships, training personnel, or maybe there's something else that we didn't ask about. And if that's the case, maybe you could drop us a line using the chat feature to sort of say what are the things that you are the most worried about if we didn't ask. And we'll take maybe another 10 seconds to get everybody an opportunity to vote, and then we'll check out our results. And feel free again to share your thoughts if there's something else that we didn't ask about that concerns you about enhanced video. Okay, most people have voted now, so I'm going to go ahead and close it, and I'm going to share the results so we can take a quick look at that. Okay, and it looks like that installation, data storage, and PSAPs are all pressing concerns, but really the number one concern is training personnel, which we can certainly touch on later. If you have questions, please submit them using the question feature. But for now, I'm going to close this poll and hide the results and turn things over to Eric. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate it. Good afternoon to everybody on the East Coast and in the Central Time Zone, and good morning to everyone on the West Coast and in the Mountain Time Zone. It's my pleasure to speak to you today about enhanced video and limited liability. I am a lawyer. I have spent the past 20 years in the industry. I would say probably about 75 to 80% of what I do is in the electronic security industry, representing buyers and sellers in the industry, software providers, service providers, third-party monitoring facilities. I started out my career in the industry defending security providers in catastrophic liability lawsuits, and that experience sort of forms the basis of much of what I'm going to talk to you today about in terms of limiting your liability. So with that, let's get started. If the lawyer can make the technology work. So I wouldn't be much of a lawyer if I didn't have a disclaimer, and I've tried to keep this as simple, as sweet as possible. So the information that I'm going to impart on you today isn't intended to be and shouldn't be understood as legal advice. It's not. And I'm going to tell you that you need to consult an attorney for legal advice, and hopefully that attorney will be me, but you need to make your own decision. So let's start first with sort of an overview, if you will, of how video is used in today's security marketplace. And what I've done on this slide is I've tried to list, based on my practice, what I see in the industry, how video is currently being used. Steph, could I ask you to mute your...
I absolutely will.
Thank you. I have a difficult time concentrating. So this is a list of how I see video in the market today, and I'd like to just walk through it so that we all have a place to start and a background on video. So the first bullet I've listed is video verification, which is the subject of today's presentation. And in my experience, video verification means the use of video at an alarmed premises to verify that an alarm is not a false alarm, but is in fact an alarm that requires a dispatch. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We talk at great length about that today. But that is a use of video that I see, and I see that use increasingly in the marketplace. Secondly, I see video storage. Video storage has been around for a million years. It's not like that's anything new. But what I've seen in video storage is sort of technologically has progressed in the sense that there's local device-based storage. That's changed pretty dramatically in the past 5 years, given the ability to store how much you can store, how you store it, how long it's stored locally, and to what extent it gets streamed up to the cloud at some point, and those sorts of issues. So I've seen clients have to deal with those issues and have to deal with that in a contractual setting. But also an increased usage of remote video storage, cloud-based, really with the massive amount of storage that has become available on the cloud and the increased availability of bandwidth to subscribers throughout the country. And we're really talking mostly commercial, but also to some extent residential. I've seen a lot more streaming and remote storage of video on a wholesale basis out to cloud-based service providers, as opposed to storing that video on a device at the premises. There are cost savings. There are players in the industry who offer that, and I'd be interested in getting any feedback during this seminar from anybody who has any opinions about remote cloud-based video storage, how it's going in the market. The next way I see video from my clients is what I call, and I think what is commonly called, guard tours. Simply stated, and it's not different from cop or guard in a box, it's sort of the same concept. But the idea is that at some remote facility, some individual will log on to a camera somewhere or a series of cameras based upon, some sort of schedule or time, or perhaps even in a random way, to drop into that premises and see what's going on in that premises, rather than having a physical presence, the guard actually walking the premises and striking the key box to show that he or she was there. This is really just a use of video to accomplish the same thing. A similar service that I've seen my clients offer in video are video escorts, and that's just really where somebody's working late at the office, for example, and they want to have some escort to their dark, lonely parking spot in a garage somewhere or in a remote, isolated parking spot, and they enlist the aid of the cameras and some person at a monitoring facility to watch the person progress off to their car. So I've seen video escorts increasingly. There's much, much, much more remote real-time video access and retrieval, where people can access on a real-time basis video that's coming from their cameras. And also there are some players in the market who have developed either a smartphone or PDA-based protocol or even a mobile application to deal with remote real-time video. I've seen movement in that area as well, and have clients who are active in that area. So, and then the last thing that I've kind of put here is that every time I do this presentation to the industry, I always ask people in the room if there's some other use of video that they've seen, so that I can learn, and I can give you extra credit, so I can learn what's going on in the marketplace. So to the extent that you're seeing something out there, if you can let us know through the chat feature, that would be hugely appreciated on my part. So today, what I'm going to try to do is to provide you 4 simple foolproof steps. They're guaranteed to limit your liability if you choose to do video generally, but video verification specifically. Rule or step one is you got to follow the law. No brainer. We're going to talk about what the law is. I'm going to give you some guideposts so that you can understand the law and follow it effectively. Two is I want you to use effective, enforceable subscriber agreements if you're a retail provider, and an effective, enforceable wholesale or dealer contract if you're a remote facility, a third-party contract monitoring facility. Step number three is I want you to buy plenty of insurance, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in some detail. And step number four is I want you to establish and enforce sensible policies relating to video. And that sort of dovetails on the concern about training. What we need to do in this industry is come up with sensible policies and protocols about how we're going to deal with video and then enforce them uniformly with respect to employees. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But here are the four, in my opinion, simple foolproof steps that are guaranteed to limit your liability if you're going to do video, and in particular, if you're going to do video verification. So let's get started down the road of learning the law so that you can follow the law and take advantage of step number one of the foolproof steps. So this is sort of an overview of what I'm going to talk to you about in the next 10 to 15 minutes. This is a very complicated area of the law. Each of these bullets require a great deal of knowledge and a lot of work, and it's constantly evolving. But what I'm going to try to do is give you a primer, if you will, some rules of the road, a flavor, and a taste. And I think based upon that, you should be able to sensibly follow the law in your business. So the first thing we're going to talk about is privacy law, and we'll get into this into some detail. Privacy law consists really of what I call public privacy law, which is generally the privacy of people with respect to the government, and it involves the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which is the amendment that prohibits and protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. That's what I refer to as public privacy. We're also then going to talk about private privacy, which is common law privacy. Common law is judge-made law. It's law that's made by courts over hundreds of years dating back to our English roots and creating claims and causes of actions and protections relating to privacy, and I call that private privacy. We're going to talk about that at length. I'm going to give you some key phrases and some touchstones on how that law works. I'm going to give you some cases to look at, and I'm hoping that we can begin to formulate sort of an approach on your part when you're doing this work moving forward. I'm then going to talk about federal video and audio statutes. We're going to talk about the federal wiretapping law, which is a very important law in this field. We're going to talk about audio and video together, how they work together. We're going to talk about covert audio when it's linked to video. Those are hidden audio devices and video cameras. That's an absolute no-no, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. Then we're going to talk about state statutes, because the law of every state applies with equal force to the federal law or to the common law. Statutes are laws that are passed by legislatures and then signed into law by the governor of a particular state. And one of the things you need to keep in mind is that if you are in New York, if that's where you do business, but you've got subscribers in California, then I'm 99.9% sure that you in New York need to comply with the law in California. The reason that I say that is because that automatically means if you're a national player, you've got a patchwork of 50 different states, plus the District of Columbia, plus Commonwealths, and other territories that you need to be concerned about if you're doing business there. So we're going to touch upon those state statutes. We're going to talk about privacy statutes, anti-voyeurism statutes, and we're going to talk about state wiretapping laws as well. The other concept that I'm going to try to introduce to you today is the difference between direct liability and indirect liability. It's a very important concept. In direct liability, you're kind of the primary actor and you're liable and involved right away. As a security provider, we're often a step removed from the primary actor, and we end up having potential for indirect liability. Make no mistake about it, liability is liability, direct or indirect. But I want you to begin to appreciate the difference between the two and see how it plays out. And also, frankly, you are afforded a bit of protection by not being directly liable. But if you're not directly, if you're being smart, you won't be directly liable. There are ways to become directly liable if you're not being smart, and we can talk about, a little bit about that today. So that's sort of an overview of the law and the rules of the road and where we're going. So let's try to now drill down just a little bit on that if we can. So the Fourth Amendment is one of the Bill of Rights. It's the Fourth Amendment of the first 10, the Bill of Rights, to the United States Constitution, and it prohibits unreasonable search and seizure. And you will see in the news or in, if you're a lawyer, you would see in legal cases where video in the context of let's say, police action might be deemed to be an unreasonable search or seizure of a person. So, for example, a related case was the Supreme Court last term held the circumstances under which police could use GPS to follow people that they were looking at to arrest. That all comes out of the Fourth Amendment, video, audio, GPS, data. That requires, Fourth Amendment liability requires state action of some kind. Generally, it's not private parties acting. It's almost always, well, there's got to be some state action to get to the Fourth Amendment. So we're talking police, schools, universities, the TSA when you go to the airport, those sorts of things. The reason I point that out to you is I want you to be aware of what we are or aren't concerned about. Generally speaking, in the private security industry, we're not focused on the Fourth Amendment. Generally, the remedy for a violation of the Fourth Amendment has to do with suppression of evidence at a hearing or a trial against a party. It's usually something we're not too concerned about. I don't want to spend a great deal of time on it, but I want you to understand it contextually what it is we're concerned about. We're really concerned about private parties and private action, which brings me to my next bullet point, the common law. Again, common law is judge-made law. Cases become what's called stare decisis, or rules of the road that courts apply and follow. And they reason by analogy, and a body of law has developed over the past 230 years in the United States, with 50 different states and a federal system, regarding these concepts of privacy. And there are various different torts, but the one that's most prevalent, the one that's most popular, if you will, is invasion of privacy. Sometimes you see it called other things like intrusion upon seclusion, and there are some technical differences between those torts. Again, 50 states, different states call it different things, but the concept I want you to get today is invasion of privacy. And really, it's my primary concern when I represent players in the industry about video and what I'm concerned about. So a little bit about invasion of privacy. It's a tort, which means it's a wrong, not a contract, not a breach of contract, but a tort, a different area of the law. Tort is like malpractice, doctors. It is car accident cases when somebody's negligent. That's the body of law known as tort. Invasion of privacy falls within tort. Now, it's an intentional tort. Some torts are negligent, malpractice, an accident case, a car accident case where you're negligent, you made a mistake. Invasion of privacy is intentional. That's a little helpful to us in the security industry in the sense that the plaintiff then is obligated to prove to us that we did something intentionally wrong, that we intended to do something wrong with video. I think that's a difficult burden, and that goes back to my direct versus indirect liability. But I don't want you to ever hang your hat on this. I just want you to be aware of it. In order for there to be an invasion of privacy, there has to be an unlawful intrusion. It can be physical or otherwise. It could be walking into somebody's home, walking into somebody's hotel room. That could be a physical unlawful intrusion that could give rise to a claim for invasion of privacy. But it could be otherwise. Before video, the courts were often focused on telescopes and binoculars. But since video and since audio eavesdropping devices exist, the otherwise really has become using cameras to intrude into others' premises. So, for example, it might be reporters in a boat behind a house on a lake in Florida. That case is out there. But it also might be the camera that's already within the house or within the premises. And if you're unlawfully engaged in that camera, viewing that camera, that might be an unlawful intrusion, giving rise to a claim for invasion of privacy. The intrusion has to be into the private affairs of another, not public affairs. Now, there are cases where people are in public places dealing with private affairs, meetings, dinners, those sorts of things, and the courts have found there be an invasion of privacy. But generally speaking, we're talking about what's happening behind closed doors or in a private spot, okay? The two tests to succeed on a claim for invasion of privacy, the first one is, did the plaintiff, and the plaintiff is the person bringing the claim, the person who claims their privacy was invaded, did the plaintiff have a reasonable expectation of privacy? A reasonable expectation of privacy. That's the sort of first test I think you have to ask yourself when you're dealing with video. Am I concerned that under these circumstances that are now confronting me, that somebody could claim they had a reasonable expectation of privacy? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The second thing that you have to prove in court to succeed on a claim for invasion of privacy is that the defendant's acts, and here we'd be talking about the security provider to be clear, the defendant's acts were highly objectionable to a reasonable person. So you need a reasonable expectation of privacy and highly objectionable acts in order to succeed on a claim for invasion of privacy. We'll get back to that in a second. I want to give you some more law to try to formulate how to make this work. And look, I want to say something right now because I realize I'm doing the lawyer thing, and I want to make it real clear to everybody who's listening. I love video verification. I love it. I think it's an opportunity for you to sell equipment at a profit. I think it's an opportunity for you to add on good recurring revenue, and I think we can deal with the risk. But you do have to be advised about what the law is. So let me try to give you a little more. The federal wiretapping laws are very important here. Now, these laws really were initially created to deal with phone wiretaps, but they've been rewritten, and they're written broadly enough to deal with the interception of audio and video, unpermitted interception of audio and video in today's marketplace. So Title III is what you'll hear people call this. It's the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, and that federal law, applying to everybody in the United States, makes it unlawful to intentionally, there you are again, it's an intentional wrong, so whoever would be bringing a claim under this law would have to prove that you acted intentionally, intercepted or tried to intercept wire, oral, or electronic communications, wire, oral, or electronic communications via electronic or mechanical means, which in my mind means video camera or some sort of an audio intercept. So let's step back a second. Intercept, in my mind, means exactly what it says it is. You can think about it as somebody eavesdropping or tapping on a phone, a wiretap on a phone, or frankly, there are cases where people pick up the phone and listen, and they shouldn't be. So that to me is intercept, and it's very broad, and I want you to appreciate how broad it is. And then you look at the next element of this wrong, of this law, and that is wire, oral, or electronic. So in my mind, wire really deals with things like telephones, back when we had POTS lines, and really that's how the law was originally written. But then you talk about oral or electronic. And I say to myself, oral, interception of oral communications, to me that means that if I've got a video device in a premises with a microphone, or there's a microphone integrated in part of the system, it's now a violation of federal wiretapping law for me to intercept two people talking at that premises, an oral interception. It's also, it seems to me, unlawful for me to, somehow intercept some sort of electronic communications. The way electronic communications often comes up is, in today's world, is email. But in my mind, if somehow somebody's plugging into an IP camera and they shouldn't be, that could be an electronic interception in my mind, and I'd have some real concern about that. The key, though, is it has to be some content. Really, it has to be some content that's being intercepted. That could be video content or audio content, okay? But it can't just be dashes and dots, if you will. It has to be some sort of content. There are, I'm now down to unless, there are some exceptions to the law. For example, this wrongful conduct may not be covered by the Act because you have consent. The Act carves out communications that are intercepted with consent. And under the federal statute, the consent is one-party consent. So one of the things we do in our contract is we always put in a consent provision, be it a subscriber contract or a dealer contract, where we say, look, if we're going to provide you this video-based service, you're going to consent, or audio service in the event of a two-way audio system, you're going to consent to us intercepting and recording the communications. And that ought to cover you under the federal wiretap laws, at least with respect to the subscriber. There are other exceptions. The interception may be authorized. There's an ordinary course of business exception. There's also a communications service provider exception, which may apply. A monitoring facility may be deemed to be a communications service provider. I don't want to go too far into those. They're highly technical, and they're a little bit down the road on video verification, but I wanted to give you a flavor. The other thing I want to tell you about is covert audio devices are absolutely unlawful under the ECPA. It's Section 2512. If you've got a video camera that's got a hidden audio device in it, that piece of equipment is absolutely unlawful. I know you can buy them on the internet. I know people trafficking in them, but you need to be careful. A couple of years ago, probably more than a couple of years ago, big FBI raid up in Metro New York for someone who was importing these cameras with covert audio, and it was a bit of a mess. So I want to warn you, don't go down that road of covert audio in video devices. It's a criminal penalty. By the way, Title III above is a criminal act, but it also has the right to civil remedy, which means that you can get sued in a court of law for money damages by a private party under Title III for violation of the wiretapping statute of the ECPA. So you need to be concerned about that. All right, let's move on. Not only are there federal wiretap statutes, but there are state wiretap statutes. They generally mirror federal law. The issue is consent. As I said to you, under the federal law, one-party consent is adequate to get you out of the act. But in some states, you have all-party or two-party consent. Every party needs to consent. Last time I looked, and it was a couple of years ago, these are the states that required two-party consent. California is the big one. My home state of Pennsylvania also requires it. Where it gets interesting is, what do you do where the monitoring facility is receiving communications in, let's say, New York, which isn't listed up there as a two-party consent. It's a one-party consent state. And the data, the video and audio data, is coming from California or Pennsylvania, which requires all-party consents. We try to deal with that through contract. We try to get people's permission, and that's really what the front line defense on that, but you need to be sensitive about that issue. Anti-voyeurism statutes. So shortly after smartphones, or I don't think they were called smartphones then, but shortly after manufacturers started plugging cameras into every phone that came out, flip phones, if you will, there was a proliferation of state anti-voyeurism statutes. If you're old enough and you can remember, there are a whole bunch of cases 10 years ago about people doing stupid stuff with their cameras. And the voyeurism context had to do with, using the camera to look on inappropriate parts of other people's anatomy. There are a bunch of them out there. You need to be aware of them. You need to be sensitive to them. They're at the state level. If you follow some of the rules and the discussions that we have down the line, I think you'll be okay, but I want you to know that they're out there. And again, if you're doing business in one state and you're in another state, you probably have to comply with the other state's laws, so you probably want to know what the laws are in those states. Now, let's talk about direct and indirect liability, or secondary liability. Direct liability, in my mind, is where you are really doing something, somebody is doing something actively wrong, okay? It's unlikely that a security provider is going to get into a direct liability situation, but it's possible. Indirect liability is where you're not doing something wrong, but you might get dragged in. So let me give you an idea what I'm talking about. You have a subscriber who asks you to install a video camera system in a place that you clearly understand it shouldn't be installed. Let's say a restroom, okay? Under those circumstances, while you didn't directly do something wrong, you were a secondary actor. You knew or should have known that where you're putting that camera was inappropriate, and you could be held to be a conspirator or an accessory or any number of legal theories as a secondary or vicarious liability defendant. And that's what when I make the distinction between indirect and direct liability. Direct liability to me is where you've got somebody who's looking into the camera, no matter where it is, and shouldn't be, and invading the privacy of others. And we can talk about that a little bit in a second. But those are the concepts. And really, I think that 9 times out of 10, because we're not directly involved in many of the installations, we're okay. You just got to be sensitive to those situations where we might have some liability. Video verification, enhanced video. So historical background. Municipal response to false alarms. Municipalities stopped responding to false alarms and started these policies of no response, absent some sort of verification. So in response to that, the industry very early on started some sort of verification. There's audio verification through some providers where they'll listen in at the premises. There was enhanced and continues to be enhanced call verification. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. There's multiple zone dispatch requirements as a way to verify alarms. And today is video verification, and that's really what we're focused on. So to me, fast forwarding today, taking it out of the historical context, it's really all about the cameras. The video is smaller today. The cameras are smaller and less expensive. The bandwidth is increased exponentially. Video cameras are universally accepted. The Boston Marathon case, the polling after that made it very clear that the public is willing to accept video cameras as a security step. Consumers are increasingly comfortable with video. In fact, they're increasingly demanding video. Some of the offerings in the marketplace that permit residential video and people to sort of check their latchkey kids when they come home, that the larger providers and some of the larger manufacturers are now providing. So in my mind, people are really getting on the bandwagon with video. Next, it's all about the money. Video leads to faster response. Faster response leads to more apprehensions, and more apprehensions lead to deterrents. Why does that matter? 2 reasons: subscribers and insurers. And why are subscribers important? Let me give you some more history. So once upon a time, insurance companies earned a significant part of their profit by paying out less in claims than they received in premiums. Paying out less in claims than what they received in premiums. That makes sense. The insurer's cost of claims, including the claim itself and the management of the claim, including attorney's fees, was linked to profitability. So back in the day, and we're talking, before the 60s, insurers sought to mitigate their claims, and they eagerly partnered with alarm companies and even offered insureds premium discounts for alarms and helping to establish third-party certifications like UL and those sort of certifications. From the insurer's perspective, alarms meant arrests meant deterrence, and deterrence meant fewer claims. Insurers were happy because fewer claims meant greater profits. Insureds, also known as subscribers, were happy because fewer claims meant lower insurance premiums. Alarm service providers were happy because they got to sell, install, service, and monitor alarm systems at a profit. Eventually, however, changes in the marketplace transformed this close partnership. Insurers operating at increasingly sophisticated levels of investing, with significant holdings in worldwide investments over the past 30 years, let's say, realized they could earn extraordinary profits if they invested their premium dollars wisely. Wall Street got good at making money through sophisticated financial plays. Insurance companies made money on the premium dollars they invested, and given their success, claims management was no longer as important and wasn't a key to profitability for insurance. As a result, alarm systems became less important to the insurance industry, to the point where some new folks in the industry probably don't even recall that there was a partnership with the insurance industry in the distant past. And frankly, at my age, I plead guilty to that. I don't remember those days. The second thing that happened is over the past 10 years, those local law enforcement agencies that I told you about were feeling the pressure of an increasingly limited municipal budget, began to institute a policy of non-response as a way of saving tax dollars. After all, the vast majority of alarms were false alarms, and responding meant using valuable municipal resources. So early on, we responded in the industry with means to verify alarms, telephone calls, audio, and then video. And in the past 5 years, alarm verification in the industry has become such a priority that some people have suggested to me the industry has moved away from catching criminals to verifying alarms. And here's where I think video verification becomes increasingly important. In today's economy, insurance companies are returning to their historical model of profitability through claim mitigation. They can't make money in the market like they did in the past 20, 30 years. And tight municipal budgets mean police often don't have the resources to investigate property crimes. What we call non-response, the insurance industry calls non-investigation, because there just aren't the resources that can be spent to look at property crimes. So in my mind, these two factors present a real opportunity for the industry. Insurers are again looking at deterrence, and coupled with the inability of police to investigate property claims, deterrence is more important than ever, since catching the bad guys means limiting the loss and other losses. So, limited liability. Given what we've discussed, how do you profit from video verification when limiting liability? In this economy, how do I sell video verification? So I'm very positive. What I think you need to do are the 4 foolproof steps I've given you. Follow the rules, use good agreements, lay the risk off to insurance, establish and enforce sensible policies. So we've talked at length about the rules. Let's talk about laying off the risk to insurance. There are 2 methods to limit risk of loss. One is to allocate the risk of loss per the agreement, per your subscriber or dealer agreement. We'll talk a little bit about it in a second. And the second one is to lay it off to insurance. I'm a big believer in insurance. You should buy it until it hurts and then buy some more. You never want to be in the position of not having sufficient insurance. I've represented companies who are in that position. It's not a pretty place to be. You don't want to be there. My advice for you is to use an industry-experienced insurance professional. I'm glad to recommend one if you don't know them. Key coverages are errors and omissions and completed operations. To be sure, there are others, but you need to have those. A CGL policy alone is not sufficient. Okay. Item 4, establish sensible policies regarding video. There are a lot of issues that you need to deal with in video. New issues, emerging, how we're going to deal with them. People are dealing with them differently. So who owns the video data? Where's it stored? For what period of time? Who has access to the video? Who has physical access to the video? Who has access by the internet? Under what circumstances? If it's stored, at what cost? If so, what is the cost and who pays it? The reason I think it's very important for you to establish policies is to provide you some defense in the event of liability lawsuits. So let me give you a hypothetical that's based upon a real life case. Rogue employees in a central station or otherwise use camera or video for unlawful purposes. How do you defend against that? That's a real concern. Let me give you an example. A New Jersey casino case, I'm pretty sure it was Caesars. 2 casino employees, both male, used sophisticated casino surveillance cameras as to peep on pretty female cocktail waitresses late at night. They got turned in by a couple of female co-employees. That ended up in different litigation. The casino got fined $80,000 by the New Jersey Casino Control Commission after they were alerted and the video was obtained. The employees clearly weren't authorized to use the cameras in this fashion. Employer liability defense under these circumstances is outside the course and scope of employment. That what those employees did was not within the course and scope of their employment. They weren't authorized to do it. Now, as we all understand, employers are generally liable for the wrongful conduct of their employees. Where an installer negligently causes an auto accident in his installation van, then the employer is vicariously liable. Or the installer negligently installs a system and the system fails to respond. Again, the employer under those circumstances is responsible, is liable vicariously for the installer's negligence. A defense to that sort of negligence is that the employer is not liable because the employee's wrongful conduct is outside the course and scope of employment. So how do we get it outside the course and scope of employment? We establish sensible, unambiguous policies that make it clear how video is to be handled, stored, retrieved, who has access to it, those sorts of things. And those policies really will provide a very significant defense. Questions I want you to ask in terms of your agreements, because agreements and subscriber agreements and dealer agreements are so important. I spent years defending alarm companies, monitoring facilities, third-party monitoring stations in liability suits, and our approach to protecting you was on the paper. That's how we win cases in the alarm industry. It's very difficult to win these cases in front of a jury. You have to win them before you ever get to a jury. Questions I want you to ask about your contract. Does your current form of contract address alarm verification? If you're doing alarm verification, your contract better address it. You need to have flexibility. You need to tell your subscriber or your dealer, if you're providing services to a dealer, what you may or may not be doing in the future in terms of verification. If there's a no response policy, how's it going to be handled? You need to deal with that in your contract. Does your current form of agreement actually even address video? If you're using a contract from the 1980s or the 1990s and video really wasn't contemplated and you're doing video work and you get into a scrape about video, if you haven't dealt with it in your contract, I think you've got some major problems. How well does your current form of agreement allocate loss? You need to do a contractual review every few years. Is your video writer and web-based agreement enforceable? If you're driving folks to the web for video services and you're asking them to go to a portal, set up an account, and agree to some web-based T's and C's, are those T's and C's enforceable in your favor? They may or they may not be. Under the what's called the existing duty rule, if you're a party to an existing contract with a subscriber under which you're providing services to that subscriber, your ancillary or secondary web-based agreement may not be enforceable, and there's ways to deal with that. In your agreement addressing a video, do you contemplate video? Do you require the subscriber to maintain sufficient bandwidth? Are you limiting the subscriber's use to lawful uses, no eavesdropping, no invasion of privacy? This is important stuff. Is the video an alarm monitoring? Is it alarm? Is it being monitored? Is it acting as alarm? Or is it merely video verification? You need to say that. Is it fire protection? No, you need to say that. When you receive video, when you actually receive video feeds and you're actually monitoring it, when is that going to happen? Is it all the time, some of the time? And when you do receive video and you are looking at it, what are you obligated to do? How are you going to respond? There are issues regarding ownership of intellectual property and ownership of the data. We talked a little bit about that. I want your alarm contracts, I want your subscriber dealer agreements to include a limitation of liability and exculpatory clause, an indemnity provision, clauses requiring the subscriber or the dealer to maintain insurance and to look to that insurance. Those clauses are enforceable and they're very effective when defending companies. Waiver of subrogation, in which the insurance company basically waives its right to come back against you. I've had a number of successes enforcing those clauses. I can't overemphasize how important those are. Contractual limitations on action. The statute of limitations for a property damage case under New Jersey law is 6 years. If I can limit a claim to 1 year post-occurrence under the contract, and that's enforceable, why not shave off those 5 years of liability? I want you to have effective warranty disclaimers. I want you to have a waiver of jury trial, a venue provision so that the lawsuit gets litigated where you want it, and a choice of law so that we know whose law is going to apply. I went a little longer than I did, so I'm going to apologize to my partner, Larry Folsom. But Stephanie, I'm prepared to turn over to Larry. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. I am now turning it over to Larry. Larry, you can just show your screen when you're ready. Okay.
All right.
I'm going to mute myself again. Yeah, I'm going to mute myself so that you don't hear me typing away.
Perfect. All right, just a quick introduction. So iViewNow, it's a busy slide, but iViewNow is a central station video interface. We essentially catch video from disparate devices, whether they're NVRs, DVRs, Videofied as well, or IP cameras. We're integrated at the central station level with Bold, Mastermind, Stages, MicroKey, IBS, and we're finishing off our DICE integration. And so I ended up in this space with frustration. Basically, I couldn't find a service for my alarm company that I could provide to my end user that went to a central station. And so on that journey, I've leaned on obviously the industry, and one of the best documents we have right now in the space, trying to understand this, put it in sort of alarm guy, or at least a way that I understand as a security provider's language, is the CSAA protocol that was released last year. It's 5 pages and it was made by a committee, but it does a very good job. It delineates out 2 key ideas that I think we have to talk about, which is the actual definition of video verification in that protocol. When you look at it, what it means is we have an alarm event that an operator is going to take, and then the operator is presented with video from that event. And you contrast that with the other definition that comes out of the protocol, which is remote video investigation, which is the idea that an operator would receive an alarm, there would be a gap, and then they would go look. That gap is what concerns us. So when we talk about video verification, it's important that the operator not only has an alarm signal, but has video from that event, a clip from the event, as well as the ability to look in. So when Eric and I talked about this presentation, my intent was to look at this with the eyes of my alarm company. So I own an alarm company, a traditional alarm company in Las Vegas. We've been selling and installing verification for a couple years. For full disclosure, Eric is the lawyer that we use with iViewNow, and he's also the lawyer that we use with my alarm company. So to Eric's point, we had to get right when we started with our agreements to make sure that the agreements we were using for the service were congruent with the service we were providing, as well as our insurance. We took that to heart. I suggest that everyone go and take a look at that. It's a minimal investment for obviously a great deal of protection. So what I've done is we just reached out to one of our existing clients. This was a client that came online about a year ago. The lead source for this is just a little store. But the lead source for this was one of my salespeople was out just sort of bird dogging, found a business that had "We're opening soon" sign, was prospecting. Commercial location, about 3,000 square feet. And so I'm just going to run through what was sold to them and try and talk about a practical application of the good content that Eric gave us. So we do. We try to follow Eric's rules, which is follow the rules of our jurisdiction, have those agreements, making sure that we've got insurance that's congruent, and we've got policies or SOPs within our alarm company, and ensure that our central station is running an SOP that we're congruent with as well. We use a third party today. So this particular example, like I said, it's a dollar store chain. It's in Las Vegas. This is one of the store's locations. So an overview of the store, normal challenges, right? It's a retail store with small margins, so they were very budget conscious. So my salesperson was out on the street competing with lots of alarm companies, both national and local, with a budget conscious client. It was a new location, so in a takeover, we're often able to leverage either existing cameras or security system. But this was a ground-up new install as a challenge for the price. This person's particular challenges, some of which were low-paid employees. So we knew that this person was needing to use surveillance the correct way, which is the ability to remotely view, to manage the site, manage those users' activities. Margin of loss for this person, it was a big deal. Meaning, when I went and spoke with him on Monday, I went and had a really lovely conversation with his client, and the first thing he said to me was, maybe a little nervous, but the first thing he said to me was, I'm able to change the manning of my store because of the verification, the video, and the panic video, meaning he thought he could have less people there. A little dangerous, but that was how he saw it, and if anything, it helped him manage his labor better, which is a large component for his gross margin. So he told me some pretty good anecdotal stories. It's a dollar store. He sells balloons in the store, and the balloons can get loose from the bag. We've all had this with our own customers and companies, and being able to understand if it's a false alarm or not was an issue for them. They needed to know that. Without this guy, apparently he lives 12 miles away, and that drive was problematic for him. The other thing that he was very clear with me on was that if there was a break-in, this business was a large component to his value in the world and certainly providing for his family. So when we looked at that challenge, again, I don't think we're describing any challenges here that don't look like the normal challenges we face as sales teams or as alarm companies. Our solution was a security system, a commercial-grade security system, a commercial-grade surveillance system, but what we did was we tied those two traditional elements together to be able to provide this video verification service, taking not just the alarm signals to the operator, but the video from those events as well. What I'd like to do is just walk you through the design that we used for this particular application. I'm going to talk about a security system and a DVR-based analog system, but to be very clear, video-fied, an IP-based camera, the stuff is important. It needs to be designed in a way that protects your client and the creation cost, and I understand those elements. This is just an example whereby we use a DVR and a traditional security system to solve this problem. So when we look at video verification and applying traditional security devices, we really aren't changing too many of the elements here. This was a very normal protect the doors, motions to protect interior areas, glass breaks, to enhance that perimeter protection where there are windows, and a head end and a siren and a keypad. Nothing new there. When we look at applying the surveillance products, this was the same stuff that we would have traditionally sold them, but we would have driven away and left it as a standalone sort of system, a static system that is mostly recording but not actionable for the end user. The only thing I would say to you when you're applying verification is your camera perspective is a little different. Sometimes we have the cameras further back trying to capture as many zones in a view as possible. But once we've applied the security system itself, the individual devices, and install or applied the cameras, then it's essentially, one other element. This is what the install looked like at the head end. That's just a regular control panel with a radio, and the DVR is locked up in that box. We're really fairly stringent about this idea that the storage device is always locked, and hopefully behind a locked door as well. Again, we're a pretty traditional security provider. When we go one step further, what we're saying here is we're simply associating camera views with security system points. It's not rocket science. So you've got a security system, you've got a surveillance system, and we're tying the programmatically in the cloud, tying those views with those zones. So when we look at workflow for the end user, for the central station with this simple verified system, what we're saying is that pick at the back door. So if the back door goes into an alarm, the operator or the central station is going to receive an alarm and clip a video from the event, as well as the ability to view the site. The end user, though, is also able to receive that notification of an alarm, view the site, the same way the operator is viewing it, as well as playing that same event-based clip that the operator got. And this was important to this end user, this ability when he had a false alarm to be able to see what caused it, He had a description of balloons getting loose. He also had a description of one of his employees arming the system to leave and then checking a door and having the alarm go off. And the entire course of action was the operator called them, the operator viewed the video, but he was also able to view the video on his mobile device, know it was an employee, and cancel that alarm. And it's an important element when we say video verification. Clearly, we want to deter wherever possible and capture where necessary. But video verification also means it's the end user's ability to verify whether it's real or not, meaning most of these are false alarms. It's a chance for them to understand what's causing them, but in real time to know what's happening at that site. Eric mentioned this issue of privacy, and I've thrown up a red bar here between the central station and the end user. I would suggest to everybody that make sure there's sort of a firewall, if you will, between the end user's ability to consume this video and the operator's ability. Sort of in an ad hoc way, a lot of people with central stations have been trying to use, like the client software from a device. This inability to track, this inability to be accountable for who's been in those cameras, I think is going to become a greater and greater issue for our industry. And I think it's also important to say that we want to make sure the operator can't just go look at video. So in this simple solution, we sell this daily. This is how we normally face the market as an alarm company. I would say to you, you really got to make sure you do a good site survey to ensure that you understand what the issue is for that client. Sticking to the fundamentals, back to Eric's idea of following the rules. Whether it's video-fied IP cameras or a DVR-based solution, it's still a security system. The extra element here is just video from that event. So follow your own SOP, adapt your SOPs to fit that that additional set of responsibilities that come with it. We already talked here about the agreement and ensuring that the agreement is congruent with the services that you're providing and the insurance as well. Have an installation procedure. I really think you need to get one. I'm happy to share the one from my alarm company if anyone wants it. I think it's important that you follow that SOP. It makes your installations go faster, smoother, better for the client and reducing the creation cost on small systems. But we're back to this idea that if in the future there's an issue, you're going to want to make sure that SOP is congruent with the actions of your installers, are congruent with your SOP, and all of that is congruent with your insurances and your agreement. What we are seeing is the ability to add between $35 and $50 a month. I'm not supposed to tell you what I charge. If anyone wants to call me afterwards, I'm happy to talk about at my branch level how we're facing the market with this. But what we're seeing across the country is this ability to add between $35 and $50 a month onto the end user's standard security monitoring, right? Like above monitoring and say interactive services, it's an additional $35 to $50 that we're seeing folks be able to charge. And that's my side of it. This was fun. It was a fun installation. It was fun to protect the client, but it was really fun to go back and talk to this guy about how video in general and verification specifically was helping this person manage their business. Thank you. Stephanie, I'm not sure if you're there.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I was going to say we're running a little low on time, but we still have a lot of people who are still attending the webinar, so I think we'll move into questions if that suits the both of you. I'm going to start actually with a user's question that was submitted. Russ asked, and this is sort of a hypothetical that you both probably have perspective on. Russ asked, what are the liabilities involved when a CS dispatcher reports to a police department a description of a suspect at a scene in a video, but then turns out not to be precisely correct about that description? Russ gave the example of the operator identified an unauthorized person at a scene as a female and they turned out to be male, or the person was wearing a black sweatshirt and it turned out to be blue. Is there, what are the liabilities involved with that, and are there any things you recommend to procedures, training that you recommend taking up to kind of mitigate problems with that?
Yeah, from my perspective, that's not one I'd lose a lot of sleep over. I think if the operator is making a good faith effort to get it right, that's probably adequate. I mean, you know, the video cameras are not, by and large, are not, you know, MGM brand HD TV video cameras. So I think there has to be some degree of understanding about what is blue may be black, and what looks blue may be black, and what looks black may be blue. I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over that one. I really wouldn't.
Okay, Larry, do you want to kind of piggyback on that?
I feel the same way. I think we're back to sort of the SOP part, and Eric, certainly speaking to the law side, from my perspective, I think that the operator, any chance the operator has to enhance the response is helpful, as long as they're following an SOP.
Okay. Okay, we've got a couple more questions coming in, so I'm going to move to the next question. Grant asks, do you find that most wholesale central stations provide full verification services? And Grant defines full verification services as operators are making decisions themselves based on what is seen in a video to, I take it, to determine what happens next. Do you see how that is playing out?
Larry, I think you can take the lead on that if you don't mind.
Sure. I would hesitate to describe it thusly. I would say to us that what our intent with this is that if an operator receives an alarm and is presented with video, in a perfect world, there's no one in the scene, and then there's someone in the scene. If there's a human in the scene, that's really not a reason to dispatch. And I don't know that any of us wants an operator interpreting a scene. I had a UL Central Station. I was partners with a company that had a UL Central Station. And from my perspective, the last thing I would want is the operator to try and interpret a scene. So the point would be, if they receive video from the site and there's a human in the queue, the next responsible thing to do is call that responsible party list and make sure that see if anyone responsible knows that there's supposed to be a human there. If no one knows why there's a human there, that's a legitimate reason, right? It's become a crime in progress. It's not just a false alarm. So I would say it's really about narrowing this down even further so that it becomes as go, no-go as possible.
Okay. We have several more questions coming in, probably more than we can get to today. So I'll ask at this stage, Larry and Eric have allowed me to pass questions on to them if we can't field them today, so you're welcome to send them to me. And I'm going to go ahead and show my screen right now so you can have a look at my contact information. Oops, sorry, that's Eric's. Let me put mine back up here. So you can direct your questions to me. Sorry, I can't talk and do more than one thing at a time. There we go. There we go. Okay. But I will save time for one more question. As I said, you can send your questions to me. I'll pass them on to Larry and Eric. Those are particularly related to questions about Larry's installer's agreement and Eric's checklist. But we'll ask one more question from attendees. And this comes from Dave. This says, what are the implications of sending the authorities these video clips or incident video? What do you open yourself up to regarding privacy? I think this links back to, Eric, your sort of Fourth Amendment discussion.
Yeah, I don't, from the security provider's perspective, as long as we're getting it right, in other words, and I can't imagine how we couldn't get it right, although I've had enough cases in my life that I've kind of scratched my head over. But as long as we're getting it right, as long as we're sending the right video, I think we're okay there. I really do.
Okay. All right. Well,
I wanted to just clarify one thing. I'm happy to share my installation SOP, but it's not an agreement.
Oh, I apologize. That was my mistake.
No worries. I occasionally get that, and my feeling on it's fairly strong, and that is you need to get with your legal counsel. I use Eric in order to make sure that the agreement is congruent with your actual, operations. So.
Great. This has been a fantastic webinar. I'm going to have to bring it to a close now because we're starting to run out of time. But I will bring the questions to a close, and I'd like to thank Eric Pritchard of Kleinbard, Bell & Becker and Larry Folsom of IVU Now for sharing their expertise. In addition, thanks to all of you who attended today. Today's webinar, Enhanced Video and Limited Liability, was presented free of charge by CSAA as a benefit to members and special guests. This webinar will be archived for future viewing. The CSAA Signature Webinar Series will be back on August 14th to discuss IP forwarding for central stations. Please visit csaintl.org for information on registering. Online, you can also view information about the upcoming CSAA education events, including the November annual meeting in Quebec City, Canada, and the October Fall Operations Management Seminar in Salt Lake City, Utah. As an incentive, I will mention that Larry and Eric are both slated to speak at the annual meeting. Requests for CEU documentation, comments, questions, other suggestions are welcome. Please send those to me at smorgan@csaintl.org. And finally, I'll ask again that you please complete the one question satisfaction survey that will appear on your screen as the webinar closes. Your feedback is valuable to CSAA as we strive to meet the changing needs of our membership. This concludes the webinar.